God Didn't Do This, written by Harrisonprince. I don't believe in God anymore. That one sentence made Mom's jaw drop and Dad's jaw clench. I tensed instinctively. Brad should know better. He was home for the holidays from university and decided that the last day before he left would be when he confessed his newfound beliefs. Mom and Dad were staunch Christians. Jesus is the way, the bread, and all that. I wasn't sure what I personally believed. I suspected there must be a God somewhere, right? Regardless, their house, their rules. As a result, I was also a Christian. I tried to get Brad's attention, to convince him wordlessly to abort, but he didn't make any sign that he'd seen me. So what, you're one of those atheists now? Dad said with dangerous uncertainty. Brad, to his credit, recognized the darkened tone. I'm just not convinced there's a God, there's not enough evidence to convince me. There's evidence everywhere. The trees, the world, the perfect solar system, everything. Everything declares that there is a God. Mom got out, her voice wavering. Brad shrugged. I just don't see those as evidence. Just because we don't know what made everything doesn't mean we can automatically assume it's the Christian God. The Christian God, Dad snorted angrily. As if you aren't one. As if you don't belong. I told you that college would try to change your worldview. I told you the world would try to pull you in. That's not what's happening, Brad started, but Dad waved him off. Mom had silent tears on her cheeks. You should get to driving so you can get back in time, Dad said, grabbing the TV remote again. Brad had asked him to mute it so they could talk for a minute. The sound of the TV took over the room. Mom left the room, shoulders shaking. Dad stared angrily at the TV. Brad caught my eye and mouthed, sorry. They'd be in a mood for a week at least, and I was stuck with them for a few more days before school started. He got up and put a hand on my dad's shoulder. Dad flinched visibly. Brad's face fell. I love you, Dad. You're making a mistake, and you'll be back. God will change your heart, he said, not looking up. His eyes were glued to the commercials. Brad sighed and moved his hand. I helped him carry one of his bags out the door. We tossed them into his trunk and slammed it shut. See you soon, bro, he said to me while we hugged, slapping backs. Bye, Brad, I replied, then chided him with, thanks for putting them in a bad mood. Sorry, he recoiled, looking apologetic. I wanted to be honest. I shrugged, not sure what to say. We hugged again, then he got in and left. It was just past noon and the sun was making the snow glow. I had to shield my eyes as I watched his car drive away, back to college. My eyes shot open. My body was suddenly wide awake. I looked at my alarm clock, almost 3 a.m. I watched the minute change to exactly 3 a.m., and the doorbell rang immediately. Confused, I sat up. The doorbell echoed around the house. No one else was stirring. I wondered if I had imagined it when it rang again. Flipping back my covers, I threw on a shirt and padded to my bedroom door. Dad was on his way to the door already. I was on the 2nd story and could see the door through the balcony railing posts. Dad was holding a bat when he opened the door. When he saw who it was, he dropped the bat. My grip on the door tightened. A police officer. They were talking. Mom appeared below, listening. All I could hear was my heartbeat. Mom collapsed to her knees. Dad went to her. She was screaming. My lungs stopped working. I slammed the door, trying to keep reality out. Patting my face with my pillow, I screamed too. I knew without even hearing it. Brad was dead. I honestly don't remember a lot afterwards. My parents came upstairs and confirmed the truth. He had been in an accident with a drunk driver who had also crashed and died. Brad had been forced off the road and his car had rolled several times in a field. I shut down and locked myself in my room for a few days. My parents let me do so, to their credit. They let me grieve. They tried to help, but one way they tried was over the line. He's in a better place now, Mom said offhanded. A better place? I hissed. He literally admitted to not believing in God right before. Doesn't the church teach that atheists go to hell? Doesn't God hate them so much that he... Dad slapped the side of my head, hard. I clutched my head and stumbled back. Fuck you, I screamed and took off for the door. They didn't come after me. I shoved my feet into my shoes and threw open the door. The handle smashed a hole in the wall and I left it hanging open while I ran off into the night. I ran down several neighborhood blocks. Snow was falling and I had no jacket. The only way to keep warm was to keep running. At a busy intersection, I had to slide to a stop, almost slipping. My breathing was ragged. My lungs were torn between breathing properly and crying. Some God that would let someone die when they wouldn't have a chance at a good afterlife. Maybe Brad had had a last-minute conversion, accepted Jesus in his final moments, lying in snow and glass while pinned down by... I stopped that train of images before they went too far. The light changed and I was allowed to cross the street. I did and continued jogging until I got to a park. I kicked the snow off a swing and sat. After thinking for a long time, I came to a conclusion. I would try and talk to God. There were lots of things I wanted to know. About how it all worked. And now, about Brad. Right there, in the slush, I dropped to my knees, and I prayed out loud. And there was no reply. I would think that a week would have been a sufficient amount of time for God to respond, but he never did. Not a peep. I didn't talk to my parents, and easily took bereavement leave from school. I was still distraught, and silence from the heavens wasn't helping. After no reply, I tried to move on. But one day I found myself looking at Brad's obituary. After that, I looked up the news article outlining the crash. I saw pictures of Brad alongside the drunk driver named David. I clicked through all the high-quality pictures of his wrecked car, toppled on its roof. The police had provided a flash drive of them to my parents on their request, and I'd managed to swipe a copy for myself a long time ago. Either the crime scene photographer was detailed or sadistic. There were pictures of the inside of the car too. Snow and glass mixed in a sea of sharp glitter. Blood was everywhere, making the snow-glass mixture look like a disgusting tiger's blood slushie. I scrolled through them endlessly, trying to make sense of something. When it caught my eye, I understood why I had been going over the images repeatedly. I had to open the image in Photoshop and mess with some filters to try to clear it up. Before Brad had died, he had written on a large chunk of windshield. For ink, he had used his own blood. The message made my throat tighten and my fingers twitch. Was I reading it right? God didn't do this. The cops hadn't talked about the message, at least not in front of me. Maybe my parents had asked them not to tell me. The message wasn't that easy to distinguish from the rest of the blood splatter, but I knew there was no way the cops missed it. Was this God's answer to my prayers? His subtle way of responding to my crying pleas? God didn't do this. What did that mean exactly? At first glance, it was self-evident. God didn't cause the car crash. But the more I thought about it, the more I questioned the underlying meaning. God didn't cause the crash? God didn't kill Brad? God didn't do what exactly? And if not God, did the message imply that someone else did? Something else? Again, my thoughts wandered to Brad's last moments. Would he have prayed? Was he thinking of us? The message seemed to indicate that he was thinking about what we would interpret about the crash. He seemed to think we would believe it was God's punishment for him. Punishment. And then it clicked. The devil, the destroyer, Balaam, Beelzebub, the fallen one, Lucifer, Satan. God didn't do this. Satan did. I did something you aren't supposed to do in my church. I searched for how to contact the devil. According to the internet, he's way more accessible than God. Any number of rituals, artifacts, locations, and objects can apparently summon a dark spirit. But I wasn't after any old spirit. I was after the dark spirit himself. After a couple hours worth of research, I found a ceremony that I could try. I did the setup in my room while my parents were at therapy together. I rolled back the carpet in my room and drew symbols the best I could into the wood with chalk. I tried my best to be accurate. Research indicated that it had to be perfect. I arranged the candles around the room like the ceremony dictated. I practiced my pronunciation of the chant, knowing it had to be perfect in order to work. I was ready. So, I performed the chant, standing outside the chalk circle. The room seemed to elongate like an optical illusion. The edge of a floorboard in the middle of a chalk ring bent upward. The nails holding the board down squeaked as it rose. The wood cracked in the middle, bending. Then, another board next to the first began to lift. Red light underneath the boards pulsated with intensity, seeping through the wood cracks and drawing lines on the walls. The boards continued to lift and bend until 4 of them surged upward. I was frozen, watching fingers emerge from under the boards. My throat tightened as 4 fingers became 8. The skin was gray and wrinkled, but also highlighted in red. As if they were indecisive, the fingers retracted again. The moment they vanished, the boards bent outward, like watching a Venus flytrap's jaws slowly open. Wood should have cracked in half with that much bending. They moved like wet noodles, peeling back from the floor. The gap in the floor was 2 feet wide and 4 feet long. Underneath the edges of the boards, there was dirt, despite my room being on the 2nd floor. It was painted with orange light, emanating from some source I couldn't see from my angle. With the new opening, the fingers reappeared, 4 on each side. A wrinkled, bald head lifted itself out of the hole. Shoulders followed, then a torso. That's where the body stopped. Just above the pelvis, the body rounded off. Its arms were abnormally long, which allowed it to lift its body off the floor and position it next to the hole. There was a soft thud when it plopped its waist onto the floor. Its face was off. The eyes were smaller than they should be, the nose too small, and the mouth lacked lips. The mouth amounted to a mere slit spanning both cheeks. The face looked like it was assembled from a long-distant memory of a human face. Its expression was emotionless. It stared at the wall to my right for a few seconds, then turned its head to look directly at me. We locked eyes. Neither one moved. I had to speak first. "I'm looking for information," I said, formal in my tone. "My brother was in a car accident. I want to know what happened." It continued to stare at me for a few seconds. Then its chest moved as it breathed in. It began to speak, but not from its lipless mouth. Its head whipped backwards, another slit appearing around its neck. There were small teeth visible inside its neck. Using its throat as a mouth, it spoke. "What do you offer?" I had expected that question. All my research had told me that the devil took payments. But before I showed my hand, I needed to make sure I was talking to the right being. "Are you the devil?" I asked, trying not to let my voice shake. The creature slowly processed my question, then nodded once, slowly. "As in Satan, the one who deceived Adam and Eve?" I pressed. "Yes," it flapped, its head snapping backward once. It would have been comical if it wasn't so disturbing. I narrowed my eyes at this disfigured creature. This was Satan? King of lies? Ruler of the underworld? Keeper of sinful souls? "You're not just a demon representing Satan, or..." I blurted before I could stop myself. "I take many forms," it hissed. I paused, then decided that was good enough. My parents would be home soon, and I didn't know if the floor was going to reassemble itself after it left, or if I'd be screwed. "I offer you a finger," I said, holding out my hand, leaving my left ring finger pointed outward, in exchange for some information. "A finger," the creature mused to itself. "A finger won't earn you much." "I'm not asking for much," I insisted. Using its elongated arms, it lifted its body up. With quick, halting movements, it walked across the floor towards me, shifting its weight between each palm on the floor. When it got to the edge of the chalk circle, it set itself down again. With one arm, it reached for my hand. I withdrew quickly. "Information first," I demanded, "then you can take it." It thought about my demand, then held out a hand, palm up. "Not until I get information," I pushed. "Take my hand and I'll give it to you," it quipped, annoyed. I sucked in a deep breath and tried not to show my disgust as I put my hand into its own. The wrinkled skin gave way under my grip. It was mushy and I couldn't feel any bones in its hand. Suddenly, I blinked and we were somewhere else, floating around in the dark. The floor left my feet and I panicked as I sunk a few inches before hovering. The creature did not react to my panic, just kept my hand tight against its own. Light filled my view below and I looked down. We were hovering over a road. Headlights passed each other below, a 2-lane road. Slowly we floated downward. The darkness around us became a night sky, and globs of snowflakes fell around us. I realized that we were there, on that night, watching. I was going to find out what happened. I was going to find out why Brad had written that message in his blood. With each passing car, I tried to pick out which one was his. I couldn't tell. It was too dark. "Which car?" I asked vaguely, knowing that the devil would realize what I meant. Without a word, a car began to glow in the distance. I squinted, and the view was enhanced. I could see right into the windshield. Brad's face, leaning forward, trying to see better in the heavy snowfall. It was him. As he approached, I saw another car coming from the opposite direction. I pointed my focus on that car and saw him, the same face from the news story, David. He was focused too, like Brad, leaning forward, trying to see. Only he looked confused, startled. Something was confusing him, spooking him. I could feel his curiosity and fear in my own body. I could feel his words forming on my mouth. "What the fuck is that?" we both muttered. The devil continued to descend with me until we hovered at the height of a streetlight. All the while, I kept my focus on David, my brother's killer. David stared down the road, still confused. He had slowed a little, taking his foot off the accelerator. I could tell he was looking at Brad's car, but he was seeing something that was wrong. As they drew closer together, I craned my neck, trying to see every detail. I would only get to see this once, I knew. Suddenly, David looked up. We locked eyes. He saw me. There was no way around it. His gaze fell upon the creature to my right. He screamed. The wheel swerved. He couldn't correct it. Heart skipping a beat, I turned and looked at Brad. Brad was also looking up. He'd seen us. He hadn't seen David's car yet. His mouth was slack. It was incomprehensible to him to see a creature and his brother hovering over the road just 20 feet in the air. I closed my eyes before the collision occurred, despite how much it cost me to see this scene. I didn't open them until the sound of groaning metal ceased. Both car engines died, and the road went silent. The silence was deafening until a noise interrupted it. Crying, sobbing, screams. David was screaming. Brad was crying. I knew that the creature was enhancing my hearing so I could experience them both from our position. "Take me to Brad," I managed to squeak before a sob leaked out. And then we were there, in the snow, next to the crumpled car. Brad was dangling upside down in the driver's seat, sobbing. His windshield was cracked and his window broken. Blood dripped from the base of his neck where a glass shard had been lodged. "Brad," I whispered, the full weight of everything hitting me all at once. It was my fault. It was all my fault. Brad stared straight ahead, trying to ignore me. "Brad," I said, reaching out, but stopping short of touching him. He continued to cry. "Leave me, demon," he cried. I was wrong. He chanted to himself. "Brad, it's me. I'm not a demon," I blurted, but Brad looked past me, straight at the devil. And it clicked. He couldn't see me, but he could see the devil, the one who had brought me here. With a shaking hand, he reached down into the pool of blood below him and started to write on the cracked windshield, taking massive effort to lean forward and swipe out the letters in large, bloody text. Under his breath, he recited the Lord's Prayer. Every other sentence he interrupted himself with, "I was wrong. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, Dad. Please forgive me." Behind me, the devil stood up on its palms and paced toward the car. I spun around, holding my hands out. "What are you doing?" I yelled, getting between them. It ignored me. Defying gravity, it stopped on one palm, using the other to brush me aside like a curtain. I flew several feet away, crashing into the snow. "No!" I screamed. "Stop!" The world evaporated into snowflakes. I fell hard onto the floor of my room. Tears continued to stream from my eyes, and I sobbed loudly. The room was empty. The carpet was still pulled away from the floor, but the floorboards were back in their place. The chalk drawing was still outlined on the floor, candles still burning. I heard footsteps running up the stairs. It was too late to try and hide anything, not that it mattered to me right now. Because when I tried to use my hands to sit up, I felt searing pain. When I looked down, my left ring finger was missing. A bleeding stump was all that was left. I could see bone poking out from the middle of the stump. A bloody knife lay on the floor next to me. My dad burst into the room, followed by my mom. And what they saw well, it wasn't good. Even I understood why I was sent to a psychiatric hospital. I knew better than to try and tell the truth. I lied. I told them I tried to sacrifice my finger to the devil to get my brother's soul into heaven. It was a partial truth, and that made it easier to sell. After 6 months of convincing the staff that I was no longer a danger to myself or others, I was released. Not that it fixed my relationship with my parents. I've thought long and hard about that time of my life since growing up. Sometimes I wonder if I just made it up to comfort myself. Maybe I really did do something crazy and invent a cover story to protect my psyche. God didn't do this. There are still many ways to interpret that message now, knowing what I know. But what I do know is simple. It's my fault Brad is dead. It was always my fault. What I don't know is if it's permanent. Is it some kind of time-locked event that happened because I demanded to see it? Or could I change it? I'm old now, divorced, 2 kids who don't want to talk to me anymore. They've outgrown me. I don't think I ever truly belonged on this planet, especially not after what I did to Brad and my parents. I have the chalk outlined on the floor, candles burning in the correct layout, chant at the ready. I'm posting this, I guess, suicide note as a way to preserve a memory of Brad somewhere. I fucked up Brad's future and didn't do anything worthwhile with my own. I'm going to summon the devil back. I'm going to offer him my soul. And in exchange, I'll bring Brad back. It will be me in that accident, not him. Brad won't write any messages in his own blood, crying, apologizing to his family. It will be me. God has done nothing to help me. He never talked to me, never replied, never gave any signs, never offered me anything in my life. God didn't fix my life, even though I begged for years. He never did shit for me. I will gladly take Brad's place, knowing full well what it costs. But it will fix things. Brad will be alive. He will have a future. The world will be set up the way it should have been all along if I hadn't meddled, if I hadn't demanded to know how Brad had died. The world will be fixed. God didn't do this. I did.